Babylon, Damien Chazelle's fifth movie, comes out in the theaters this week, and I'm very excited to dive in and rank all 5 of his movies from worst to best. This is going to be a great ranking and a very hard one because I actually think each and every one of his movies is not just good, but almost great to perfect for me. So this is going to be a fun ranking. It was very tough to narrow it down, but I think I figured it out, and I'm so excited to get your guys' thoughts as well down below in the comment section. So if you enjoy talking movies on a daily basis, hit that like and subscribe button, and let's keep talking Damien Chazelle in this video. My number 5 is Guy and Madeline on a Park Bench. Now, for me, I've only watched this one time. I watched it about a couple years ago when I found out that he had made it actually this first movie, and that Whiplash was not his first movie ever. Now, this is a fine little low-budget movie that loves jazz. I mean, there's not much to this one for me. I think this is just kind of you watch and you're like, okay, this typically does feel like a first-time directorial debut from a director who has a lot of talent, but maybe just with a low budget, you can't really do a lot. I think the directing, the script, everything along those natures are actually really fine and fine-tuned into this movie, but this is one of his movies that I just really don't care to ever rewatch again. But I will say, if you are a Damien Chazelle fan, you absolutely should check it out because I do think it adds to your kind of emphasis on what you truly think about him as a director. Down at my number 4 now is Damien Chazelle's First Man. Now, this stars Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong, and for me, it's a love letter to not just the NASA program, but the love letter to one man who was determined on a mission. And when you really see the emotional through line that Damien Chazelle put in this by the very end of the movie, it makes you completely and utterly in love, and in a way deeply resonated with the main character. And I was surprised by that. You know, there's a lot of controversy about him not planting the flag on the moon and all those people saying that, which is a dumb controversy. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But when you actually watch the movie, there is a point to why they don't show that. There's a even more emotional and better point, at least for me. And I think when you look at this movie, this isn't just a biopic about the space race or anything. This is a biopic about one man. And for me, the way that Damien Chazelle framed this movie, I still think is one of the best things that we've seen from him as a director and specifically as a writer. Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong is restrained but perfect in the role. Claire Foy should have won that year for Best Supporting Actress, and Justin Hurwitz's score, which you're going to hear throughout this entire ranking, is incredible. And for me, should have won the best score of that year. Like, this and Beale Street were my favorite scores of that year. Overall, I love First Man. It's his only movie, though, that I've only seen twice, and I don't have the complete attention to go back and rewatch it, as I do a lot of his other ones. So that's the reason that's at my number 4. Now at my number 3, we have Whiplash. This is the first Damien Chazelle movie I ever saw, and man, what an intense ride this one was. And specifically when it comes down to the relationship between Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons. Now, this movie very much has a through line of artist and pain, and what artists feel through that pain, and when you want to be the best, how do you get to being the best? And you can substitute that for anything you want to. Now, obviously, you see that Damien Chazelle loves that jazz theme. He loves that music. He puts it into each and every one of his movies in some way, shape, and form, whether it's in the score or actually within the story. And Whiplash, for me, the way that they craft this relationship between Miles Teller and J.K. Simmons is one of my favorite relationships that we've seen in a movie thus far. And the reason it is because it does feel toxic. And in the same way, you know, there are people who I'm sure get mentors who are like Simmons, who push you to be your best, even if it's in the most degrading possible way. But also the way that I view this movie is it's Miles Teller, and if I were in Miles Teller's shoes, J.K. Simmons is like my mentality, my brain telling me I can't do this, telling me I'm a piece of shit, telling me I can go fucking jump off a cliff or something. These are the things that I think this movie really resonates with me personally, and it's a perfect movie for me, the one that kind of just fits its tempo and everything that it needs to do. And I'm not trying to say the tempo thing on as a pun intended, but every time I go back to rewatch this movie, it's an intense thrill ride, but one that I can deeply resonate with, and one that I just think is perfect. And I was so happy when this got nominated. I remember I did a double feature of this and Birdman, and it was like one of the best double features you probably could have ever had. But Whiplash is one of the best films I saw and probably has ever seen, and really much motivated me to start studying film a little bit more. Now, my number 2, it is Babylon. I went back and forth on this being my favorite one, and I think, you know, I need to see this one a couple more times. I have only seen it 3 times. That is crazy to think, but I have seen this movie 3 times before this ranking. I was very graciously sent a screener after watching the movie for voting purposes, and watching that screener again, I get the same feeling. all I can do is keep listening to the score of this movie. And if you know me, I don't listen to a lot of movie scores outside of just watching the movie or right afterwards. But Voodoo Mama from Justin Hurts and Call Me Manny are some of my favorite tempos probably since La La Land, and even Michael Giacchino's The Batman. That was also another amazing score from this year. But Babylon for me blew me away in almost every department. I had a friend who saw this back in like early February, January, and told me, Zach, it's Wolf of Wall Street meets Hollywood. And for the most part, it really is that. And Wolf of Wall Street is my favorite movie of all time, and I love old classic Hollywood. But the thing that I loved about this movie is that if you are a fan of silent films, this is like a nerd's heaven. As wild, as insane as this movie sets up within the first 30 minutes, and as much as in craziness that the trailer shows you it as, whether it's a coke-induced journey and one that has a bunch of drugs and sex and nudity, it shows the debauchery of all of Hollywood. But what it also shows is the sensitivity side and the emotional avenue of all the characters that it follows through. Kind of imagine Pulp Fiction, how it handles so many different characters and how they all intertwine from certain ways, but in a more deeply resonating way than I was actually surprised to see. I was not expecting that, and I actually got quite emotional in this movie watching it, and specifically when you look at each character. Brad Pitt is the aging veteran who's coming out of being in silent films and being one of the top tier stars to being having to do the talkies and maybe not being great at it. Margot Robbie is that tragic Hollywood star that Hollywood brings in, chews up, and spits back out like no one cared about. Diego Calva plays a character that very much is someone who's always wanted to be in the movie industry, but maybe gets a little bit too much for his bridges, and the list goes on and on. Every single person in here, while two of the characters I do think are a little bit one-dimensional, and that's probably the only reason I'm putting this at my number 2, I wanted a little bit more from those characters. Overall, I love Babylon. It's everything I wanted it to be. It's freaking Wolf of Wall Street meets, oh my god, it's literally Wolf of Wall Street meets Hollywood, and I love that. But I was also in love with how deeply resonating this movie was, and it really stuck out to me in the end. And every time I rewatch this, I just get this vibe of loving it. And the final 5 minutes is a masterpiece. It's one of the best endings that I've seen this year. In fact, it might be my favorite ending of this year. I was in tears. If you're a fan of film, that there's this thing that happens at the end that's incredible, to say the least. It's so amazing. At my number 1, it is La La Land. La La Land, I know, has kind of gotten some backlash for some reason. People are over-hating this movie. People are just shitting on it lately. And, fine. If that's what you want to feel, that's completely fine. But La La Land really struck out to me for multiple reasons. This is the musical that I've seen the most. Maybe that's blasphemy for a lot of you guys, but I'm not a musical fan. I fucking hate musicals. It's like my least favorite genre. It takes a lot for me to really like a musical. The music has to be great, the story has to be great, and the characters really have to work. I guess, okay, saying that I hate a musical so much is a little bit strong with my words, because I don't hate musicals. I'm just not the biggest fan of those genres, but trust me, there's a lot of musicals that I can fall in love with, and La La Land is one of those. Mostly because sometimes it's really not that big of a musical. It's actually one of those movies that's kind of a riff on it, and I love how the music is heavy-handed at the start of the movie, but as the relationship starts to come down, the music kind of starts to simmer away. And for me, when I look at this movie, I think, again, Emma Stone gives one of my favorite performances in any film ever. Ryan Gosling is absolutely incredible in this. The music and all the musical numbers, each and every one of them are memorable for me. City of Stars is still like one of my favorite tempos in any sort of movie. And the cinematography is absolutely incredible. This is a movie I could rewatch every single week and fall more and more in love with it. And I think what, again, Damien Chazelle crafted here was his masterpiece. Moonlight's a great movie, but this should have won Best Picture that year for me. And again, we can debate that in the comments section, but I love La La Land. I love revisiting this movie. It was my favorite movie of that year, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So with that said, guys, this is my Damien Chazelle ranking. Thank you so much again for watching this. Leave your thoughts down below. Leave your ranking. If you want a Babylon review, go check that up at the top. But of course, until next time, guys, stay classy.